time since we've been together, even virtually, as the spiking pandemic has made it more and more dangerous for us to be together. But for many of us, we had a glimmer of light on Wednesday as we ushered in a former Scrantonian to the White House,
Yes.
the 46th president. No parades or balls, but President Biden spoke of the United States, and this got right to my heart, as a place of possibilities. He didn't promise us a rose garden, but rather possibilities. That caught my attention more than anything else, and we keep it in mind. Today we are visiting the studio of the distinguished artist, humanist, and environmentalist, Diane Burko. We have the possibility of learning from her outrageously exciting art, even as we sit in our homes.
Do you want to sit here?
No.
The Schemel Forum, as usual, is committed to bringing to you the best we can find, our talented artists and thinkers that you just might not be able to find on your own. Diane has generously made it possible for us to savor and learn from her creativity today. Thanks, Diane. Take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I'm going to do the housekeeping, which is sharing my screen, which takes a moment. And whoops, I have my email. You'll see all my, well, actually, I cleaned up my screen. So
That's not fair.
and I'm ready to begin. And I'm going to begin by saying hello again, because some of you in the audience might remember that I was invited to physically be in Scranton September 2019, and I had a wonderful time. And it was a day, a university day. Isn't that what you call it, Allison? What's the
University for a day.
Right, University for a day. And that day was devoted to the environment. And I was honored actually to be there with a number of scientists and researchers and environmentalists. And we all spoke, we all gave a talk, and then we had a panel and a wonderful exchange with the audience. So when Sandra invited me back, I certainly wasn't going to give you the same lecture, right? That would be boring. And actually it's boring for me. What I really enjoyed about, is to say anything to enjoy about this crazy year that we've been through, is that I've been able to still reach out to people. I was saying to Allison that I've actually lectured in Zurich this past year and in Sonoma, California, virtually. So it's been fun. And I've really developed a range of conversations with different people, depending upon the audience. So this year, when Sandra asked me to speak, I thought it might be fun, because I didn't talk much about my art last time, to talk about my art and basically to go through that. Now, Sandra has, I know, and Allison have billed this as a studio visit. It will be in one sense, but let's be real. I'm not going to carry my computer around my studio and, have it shake and get you vertigo as we move around. So it'll be a still visit. If you want to see me in action in my studio, if you go to my website, which I'm sure Allison will put in the chat, you will be able to actually see, I think the beginning of my website has a video of studio movement and activity, and there's also a PBS segment that shows me working in the studio. But today you'll get some studio shots and a real overview. And I venture to say that the audience is similar to me in terms of decades. And I have to admit, it's I don't know, I still can't believe I'm as old as I am. And I just find that so strange still to comprehend. Maybe some of you out there feel the same way, but there've been many decades that I've been making art. And I think in this sort of little montage I put together as an intro, what you see in every single image is the landscape. And that basically has been my raison d'etre, so to speak. So I'm going to begin at the beginning, starting in the 70s, because that's when I really became a professional artist, I guess, after receiving my MFA from the University of Pennsylvania, which, by the way, brought me to Pennsylvania. I'm really from Brooklyn, New York, but even though I still think of myself as a New Yorker, I've been in Pennsylvania for just about 50 years. So I guess, you know, I'm both. So these are two images of paintings from the 70s. One is an early one is a late one, and I'll tell you something about them as we go along. But one thing I think some of you who know what I do might find interesting is there's ice and snow at the beginning of my career. And of course, ice and snow figured into my career in the aughts when I became an environmental artist rather than a landscape artist. So going back memory lane, gosh, I once had long hair. And this is an image from a poster of a show in 1977. And 1977 was a really pivotal year for me because it's when I decided or realized that I could make art from my own photographs rather than National Geographic or calendars or photographs that friends would share with me from their travels. And that happened because I was fortunate enough to meet Jim Turrell. James Turrell, if you might know, is a very famous artist, MacArthur Fellow, international superstar now, but when I met him, not so much. So James had a plane. He used to actually refit helio couriers. Helio couriers were the planes that were used in the Vietnam War. And the reason they were very specific is they have what you call a very fast takeoff. And here we are in Arizona, and his plane, he lived in Mesa, and you could fly off a mesa very, very quickly. And so I flew with Jim, and there's an image of a painting I made after that flight from my own photograph. And it was literally from that moment on that I took my own photographs of my own experiences in the landscape. Oh, someone wants to come in. Yeah, oh, I see that also. Okay. If I cross that off, you'll still see it, right, Alex? So there's a late 70s painting, and I flew with Jim on a number of occasions. First time, as you can see, was into the Grand Canyon, which was quite an experience, as you can imagine. This is the time in the 70s where there weren't many rules, and Jim didn't follow them anyway. So we literally, at one point, I felt like the wings were touching both sides of the canyon as we swooped down. And at that point in time, he made me hold the wheel, just in case someone was watching. But that's past history. I don't think he can get in trouble for it now. I returned with Marion Locks, who Sandra knew, she was my gallery dealer way back then. And she met Jim, and Jim took us both up on another flight. And that's when we went into more of Lake Powell. And I still remember a funny little anecdote that happened is that Marion was in the back and Jim and I were in the front. And Jim said, "Do you want to do a spin?" And I turned to Jim because I didn't really want to do a spin. I go, "Well, Marion, she's an older woman. I don't think it's," and Marion says, "Yes, let's do it." So of course we did it. And I still remember how the camera that I had around my neck flew up into the air, of course, as we spun around, but it was very exciting. So this is a color pencil drawing, which is another image that came from flying with Jim. And this is a large drawing that's in the collection of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. And I think it was one of the last ones I did. And this actually wasn't from my photograph. It was from an image I found of Portals of Zion. Many years later, my husband and I actually went to Zion, and it was quite an experience. So moving right along, you notice we're into the 80s now. After doing all those color pencil drawings, which I did for quite a while, I wanted to stop doing them. And I was out on the West Coast, and actually again with Marion. And we took a road trip along Highway 1. And this is an example of a painting that I did after that trip in the 80s, maybe 85. In 19, yeah, that was 85. Actually, I didn't give you the right chronology there. So this was a project I did in Pennsylvania. Sandra, I can't remember, were you in the government then, in the state government at that time? Oh, she might be muted.
Yeah, she's gonna unmute.
Unmute.
Yeah. Hold on.
She didn't unmute.
You will. Hold on.
Well, we'll get her to talk about it later. But I got the reason I said it is I got a Pennsylvania artist grant to do this project, which was about flying over all the waterways in Pennsylvania. And so part of that was going to Erie. The mistake on the lake is what people told me, but I liked it. I had a great time. There were I took this wonderful ride through the lagoons, and I also flew over Three River Stadium, and I also flew over Kinzua Dam. So this is an example of a drawing that I did over Kinzua Dam. I'm trying to remember. Fly over Kinzua Dam when I was out of Erie, or I might have done that when I was going up the Susquehanna. I can't even remember from what flight I took, but it was that whole project in the 80s.
It was River. I think you had a Rivers show at the Everhart Museum.
I did. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, if you remember things I don't remember, please.
Sure.
Add them. So in 1989, I received an incredible residency. It sort of like was dying and going to artist heaven. I lived in Giverny, France for 6 months. And the reason it was so cool was I had a Peugeot 5, $1,500 a month, round trip ticket, studio, apartment. What do I, oh, and a French easel. It was really quite something. I knew I wanted to get this grant. There's a painting that I made there while at the studio of the famous pond. And I'm standing in this photograph where Monet used to stand. Yeah, I hope you realize that. This is Monet's residence in Giverny, where he spent the last 20 some odd years of his life. I actually went to France before that with a trip with a friend, a French friend, and we went all over, did a road trip, well, a train trip too. We went to Brittany, and then we drove through Normandy. So there's a photograph of me. I love that photograph. I look so serious. In 1988. And then there I am returning after I got the grant in 1989 at Etretat, where I made a series of paintings. This is a wall that I hung work after I returned to my studio in October. Like I said, this was a 6-month grant. It started in April and it went through October, which means I saw all the seasons basically. Well, not really winter, but I had the experience of being in the garden and seeing everything bloom and change. Although, spoiler alert, they really didn't do it the way Monet did it. They had serres or greenhouses, and they would take the pots for each season and move things out and move them in for the very large visitor population that was there. But I should mention, of course, we the artists, there were 3 of us, 3 artists at these residencies at a time. We had a key to the garden, and we could be there on Mondays. At that point in time, it was closed to the public, and we could also be there before it opened and, after 6, and there was light until 9. So it was really joyous. And so on the top, you can see some of the studies. These first 4, I guess, are Etretat, and these are Belle-Île, and that's Belle-Île, and then various countryside sites, because what I did is I drove all through France. I think I did like 18,000 kilometers during the 6-month stay. And I would paint wherever I went. That's called, en plein air painting. So as I said, it was quite an experience. Got home, 89, had shows in 90, 91. And I'm now moving right on, going across centuries from the 90s into the aughts. And a major project that I worked on for 3 years was a public art project sponsored by the Redevelopment Authority for the Marriott Hotel. And you can see here a model in this studio. See, I told you it's a bit of a studio visit. This is a studio that was 8,000 square feet. We rented it until I found it. It was because I couldn't do this project in my own studio. And what you're seeing here is a model that my husband, Richard Ryan, landscape architect and artist, he built this. And it was a way of convincing the Redevelopment Authority that I should get the project. So we built that for the presentation, for the proposal. And what you can see in miniature is this painting became a painting that was 14 feet by 35 feet. And this frieze, and there was another one on the other side, is what you're seeing in the studio installation. The friezes, I think, were maybe 95 feet long or 97 feet long. And it's still there, believe it or not. So if you're in Philadelphia, you can visit the Marriott Hotel and you can actually still see this artwork. Oh, I should mention before I get there, clearly there's a connection between this Wissahickon scene, which, by the way, was made up of many photographs and montages that I took of the Wissahickon, but you can see this and the Giverny connection. I call it reflections. A lot of my paintings that I made were called reflets. So clearly there's a connection. So I painted in the studio and worked on this for 3 years. One color that I got tired of, you might imagine, was green. I just needed a new landscape. And a good friend of mine, Jane Moore, was going to visit her son in Costa Rica. And I went with her. And this was 1988, right after the project was hung, because I wanted to see another landscape. I needed some stimulation and change. I get bored doing the same thing, especially 3 years on one project. So we went to see, ironically, Andrew was so excited, he took us to a rainforest. And I didn't want to say, oh no, too much green. But it was all green. I was really freaking out. I didn't want all this green. But a miracle happened while we were there. And I should say my life is very serendipitous. Andrew and I are hanging out in the back of this motel we were staying at, smoking, I think, at the time. And I'm looking up at the sky and I see this kind of mountain and there's red stuff coming down the mountain. And I go, Andrew, what is that? And he goes, oh, Diane, that's Arenal. Don't you know that? Arenal? What's Arenal? Arenal's a volcano. A volcano? I mean, I'm from Brooklyn. I've never seen a volcano before. So that began my curiosity about volcanoes. And Andrew said, well, you know, there are other volcanoes that are extant that are in the city. I can arrange to get someone to take you around. And so that was the beginning of my volcano project. Serendipitously, it all worked out. And there's a painting done when I returned from this experience, from the experience and from the photographs that I took. That began a major project that I did for about 4 years on volcanoes. I'm not showing you all my work. It would take all day. Obviously, these are just quick examples. So I should say that after Costa Rica, Richard said, well, we can go to Alaska and we can see Mount St. Helens, where he had gone to school at Reed. So he was very familiar with Mount St. Helens in Portland. So I did that and I went to Alaska, flew, and then I went with a friend to Hawaii for 10 days. And we were, just in Big Island, Volcano National Park. I found the best pilot who worked for the observatory, and he took me around, me and my friend Martha. She was in the back, I was in the front, hanging out of the plane and shooting. And so this is an example of a Hawaiian volcano, Palami. From there, I went to Italy. Oops, I don't have any Italy examples, but there were many. We went to Sicily and we went to the Aeolian Islands, and that was quite something. And then the last place I went on this project was Iceland in 2002. Now, I should mention, because you might be curious, how the heck did she afford to go to all these places? I'm not independently wealthy, but I have been lucky and fortunate. I got a grant from the Lee Alter Foundation in 2000, after I already started getting involved in volcanoes. And it was a $50,000 grant. And it was only given, she had a whole series of grants, but for women, 50 and over. I just had turned 50. So I lucked out. I had $50,000. And I used that money that throughout the whole period for the flights, for hiring the pilots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I was able to make this happen. And I went to Iceland actually twice, once with a nonprofit group with students, and it was an exchange program. And then that was like in June. We were there for the solstice, where they have this tradition of golfing all night. I forget what it's called, but it's midnight golfing, I guess. And I came back another time with my husband in August, and I already knew my way around. We went around almost the whole island and basically looked at waterfalls that, of course, happen because of glaciers. Also, I'm a photographer. This is an example of a photograph. I do many of them. You can check them out on my website. So climate change, certainly I'm going to talk about climate change, right? That's what I do now. So this was when my practice literally changed, and it went from focusing on the landscape to focusing on the environment. And it was this painting that made me start thinking of the environment, because it was in an exhibition that was basically about Iceland and a little bit of Wissahickon. It was photographs, it was paintings, and it was actually, it was a traveling show, and the curator wanted to call it Fire and Ice, and then they decided on Flow as a title. But when it moved to the Michener Museum, she said, "Didn't you do ice paintings in the 70s? Remember I showed you that ice painting?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." She said, "Well, we have more room. Why don't we find one?" And we found this painting. And the thing that hit me as I was walking through the museum, talking about all the work, was that this exhibition was happening in 2006. This painting happened 30 years earlier. That's a lot to digest. And I started thinking about the ice. I started thinking about the snow. And I wondered if it was still there, because 2006 is when the movie Inconvenient Truth came out. It's when you had Elizabeth Colbert writing her books. Climate change was in the air. And I started researching it, found a site that talked about the comparisons, what they call repeat photography, and started making paintings that were about earlier and the present. And, if you see one, you might say, "Oh, that's winter and that's spring." But once you have an exhibition, people get it. And so that was the beginning of my eureka moment. And I worked in my studio first on glaciers and on the whole idea of time. And remember, you saw the photograph from Glacier National Park. I went there, I had images from there from USGS, and this is a major piece that was about how it changed from 1938 maybe to 2010. And then there was a show at the Locks Gallery in 2010 that was all about this concept. And these are some of the source material, the actual photographs that I used in the studio. There's an exhibition. I did this using information from scientists for a while. And then I realized I had to get back outside. I had to bear witness. And so I began bearing witness. And these are some examples of some of the work that came out of that. And you're seeing my studio, and you're seeing it back in time. And there are photographs that happened from, that's from a Greenland trip. And those are from a Chronobrian trip. And once again, if you go to my site, you can see a lot more of this in detail. In 2017, I began a series that really was the last series I did on glaciers, my focus on glaciers. And I started using this thing called Crackle Paint. Here's another studio view. And that then culminated in a major exhibition in Arkansas, of all places, where they published this really beautiful book. And shameless plug here, I think you can still get it at Amazon. And there's an install shot from that exhibition. And those two paintings are about a phenomenon that I read on the internet about, because I was always reading. NASA is my, my mantra. I'm always checking what they're showing. They have great images shared to the public. And this is about Petermann Glacier. This was a piece of ice that fell off of an ice sheet in the northern west part of Greenland. I had been on the western side, but in the middle. And this one piece here is 4 times the size of Manhattan. And there's another image of it as it's traveling down and is past Newfoundland now, and it broke into 2 pieces. So I thought that was pretty phenomenal. That's another installation shot. And to the right, you see a print series called the Elegy series. Again, you can learn more about that on my website. So I've been doing glaciers for a while. We used to have parties and we would use images. So when I realized that we were going to go to Reefs in 2018, I thought that this would be a cool image. And as you can see, we were missing people, because you go to the Arctic and the Antarctic in the winter. No, I should say you go to Antarctica in the winter, when it's summer in the Antarctica. But here I am in a totally different environment. I was lucky enough to be part of a group of about 6 of us with some scientists and divers and musicians from MIT. And I was included as the artist. And they got a grant to go to American Samoa. And before that, I went to Big Island. And on Big Island, I actually started, there's Oahu. That was my first experience snorkeling. I'm actually, when they asked me to join this project, I said to them, said, you have to join it. You're an ecological artist. It would be so great. You've already photographed the Great Barrier Reef, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at her. She was the wife of a cousin of mine. And I said, Christine, the only problem is I don't swim. So that was a big problem. But I learned enough. I, bit the bullet, and I did it. And it was quite an experience. And here you have a studio shot again of how I responded to all that experience when I returned to the studio. We were there December, January, and this is an April shot. There's a lot happening in the studio at the time. And in this right-hand corner, you might see these little squares. Can you all see them? And that are examples of lenticulars. And these are the lenticulars. And what they are actually animations that are on plastic. It's a whole technique, and it's an old technique. It's the same thing of a Cracker Jack box, when you get one of those little prizes and it's a bunny and then it's a kangaroo, or it keeps changing. That's basically the principle of lenticular. I work with a wonderful artist who really knew a lot about this technically, Anna Tass, and we collaborated on this project. And 8 of them were in this exhibition. Another catalog I think is available on Amazon or somewhere if you look for it. And what was really fun about doing this show with the National Academy of Sciences is when they first asked me to do it, it was going to be only about ice, because that's what I was doing. And when J.D. Talasak found out that I was going through social media, I guess, that I was going to the Reefs, he called me and said, the committee accepted your exhibition when I proposed it on ice, but I think they would be very excited to also include the Reefs. Well, I have to tell you, when he first asked me that, I had no idea how I was going to paint the reefs. And I said yes, but let's see what happens. And you might have noticed in that studio, and I'm going to go back to it just for a minute. Whoops. You see that canvas is horizontal. And with this series, a whole new way of painting happened for me. Earlier, the work I've shown you up until now is all oil painting. What you have down there is acrylic painting, a water base that seemed to go best with the whole idea of water. It flowed. And so what I was doing is actually pouring paint using you might see in this little corner, an air to move the air around. And so that's what you get when you look at that. Because I did these lenticulars, this is an install shot. That gave me the idea to make a video. And again, if you go on my website, you can see this video. I think it's under time-based media. So what we did here is we constructed, I had a wonderful assistant, a fabricator, Scott Newman, who created this structure for me because I wanted us to be able to look down into the water, the idea of, a tidal pool. And we had these in here, and it was a darkened room, and it really came off. I was very excited about this project. This is another install shot from that exhibition. Now we move up to the present because, it's a lot of work in the present. And I'll show you what happened from the time of that exhibition at the National Academy of Sciences till now. This is a painting I did after that show. It was based on my flying over the Great Barrier Reef, which actually I did in 2017 when I was in New Zealand to look at glaciers. And what is new here is this piece of coral that I've actually included. It's a three-dimensional aspect to the painting. And I think by looking at this, you get the idea of the flow of the paint. And it's an 84 by 60. Or 60 by 84. In my previous lecture with you, I talked a lot about how I collaborate with scientists, how they inform me, not just through the reading and not through just news, but also visiting their labs. So when I did this project with American Samoa, while my diver friends were actually diving off of Big Island, we were in Hawaii, and I made plans to go to HAIMB, the Hawaiian Institute of Marine Biology, thanks to a glaciologist friend of mine. She got me in, and I was able to see their confocal microscope, which is what this screen is. They are looking at polyps, the live part of a coral. A coral reef, when you think, what is that? It's complicated, much more complicated, I think, than understanding, a glacier that recedes or moves. A reef, it's like animal, it's the polyp, it's also plant, the algae. It's also calcium carbonate, which is what they live in, and they extrude that and create their condos, so to speak. So I went there, got a lot of information, of course, also dived, and took a lot of that information back into the studio. This is a group of paintings that came from that, which are a bit didactic, because what I was trying to do is go through the whole cycle of what happens to coral. And when you first see coral normally, it has colors like this. I learned from a pilot that I flew with over the Great Barrier Reef that when you see these colors, which I thought were really cool, that's not a good thing. That means that it's under stress, kind of like autumn leaves are under stress when they show all their beautiful colors. So that's what this painting is about. This one is about the bleaching that happens. And in this corner, and this is a big painting, so it's hard for you to read any of this, but what I have is different scenes of coral where they're healthy and where they're not. And then what happens is that single cell organisms will then embed themselves in this calcium carbonate. And that's what that fourth one in the quartet is supposed to represent. Another painting I did in 2018, and the Hawaiian archipelago really fascinated me because, these are all the different islands, and they relate to the Aeolian Islands. They're all volcanic. So everything, came together. I have all this knowledge, which was really cool. Another lab I visited was in Florida. And I went to Florida for a number of reasons. But here's a painting about Florida, the Keys. There it is. One of the things I did when I visited them, I already knew that I had to go to the Winley Key Fossil Relief Geological State Park. And again, serendipitously, how did I know that? Because I had been in Miami, I think in December, January, and I posted on Instagram that when I walked into, or actually on the outside of these different structures, I all of a sudden noticed these fossil reefs. Now, you would think that I had seen them earlier. My parents were always frequented Miami for years and years. But, there's a place called Coral Gardens. I just didn't realize it was about coral. All of a sudden, eureka. And when I posted something, a scientist friend that I met at HIMB wrote, well, if you're interested in that, you have to go to the Winley Key Fossil Relief place. So what this is from the museum, do you know the Keys are built on 18,000 years of coral fossils? That's the top of the reefs. This is their quarry, and that's what I'm visiting here. Isn't that amazing? And of course, I did a whole photo series on where I kept the circles. These are all from the quarry, and those circles represent core samples that geologists were taking. So that was a fascinating kind of foray into another area and going back into photography. Now we're moving up to the spring of 2019, and I started working on maps. It started with these NOAA coral reef alert maps, which were on the internet, and I was making prints of them. And then I was incorporating them in different paintings. From there, I went to a larger series of 88, well, there were actually 50 by 88. And I started with this one painting, which is a map of all of the glaciers. And that led to more paintings about the glaciers and even more. Well, I should just point out that this painting is about Antarctica, and this one is about the Arctic. And conversely, we have here a map of all the reefs of the world, and this is a wall in the studio that's all about coral reefs, and this is the end of this 56-foot long series. It ends with a piece of dead coral. Richard had given me coral fans for Valentine's Day, also some sponges, so of course I started incorporating them in my work. You might all remember the summer and the fall of 2019, not that far away, and the horrendous heat in Europe and the horrible fires in Australia. I have friends, naturally, who live in Paris and France. Way back, I made them years ago, and we really stuck together. So I would hear, about the Parisian heat wave and seen it on news. And so I, started researching that map. And that map led to my beginning of painting about that. But I put the painting aside because I just thought it was too literal. And I made this painting instead, which was part of that series that I was doing of NOAA. But what you have here is a change, okay? At some point in my studio, I realized that I could put one on top of the other. And the reason that was important, well, you see, this is the map here. This was crucial. Way back then, we already had 415 particles per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's in there. And that's, of course, what led, one of the contributing factors that led to that. I was giving a lecture during COVID, and I was talking about the fact that you would think you know, and I read in different news articles that, yeah, well, now that we know we're not driving, everything's gone down. But actually, when I went to look, if you can see, this was a lecture I was giving, I remember, in Sonoma. Before I gave it, I looked and I found out, wait, it's even more than it was a year ago. And that's because CO2 stays in the atmosphere, okay? And, you know, it's hard to comprehend that. But going back to this top and bottom, look what I decided to do. I took that painting that I put away in the racks and I turned it. And once I turned it, everything made sense. And I added another 60 by 84 inch panel. And here we have a finished piece. Oh, I'm sorry, the title's not there, but it's called Summer Heat. And there it is in the studio. And there you have another painting, which I'm now sitting in front of, but I added another piece to that. There's that fan that you knew about. And the piece I added is right there. Another studio shot. See, you keep visiting my studio virtually. Okay. So lockdown, I'm bringing us right up to the present. This was the first painting I did when we were locked down. And you might notice it has maps in it, because what did we keep seeing? The map of America and California and Washington and New York. These are some shots. I did some studies of 20 by 20s. And here's July, more studies. And this painting, I began this painting based on a graph of what was going on in July. You might have guessed, yes, this is the United States, Europe, Japan, everyone else, Canada, not us. And this is the finished piece, which is actually using an image of the virus, but not the usual one, which I found too hackneyed and trite. And here's another painting that I began that's about COVID spread. There it is, finished. And now I'm just going to give you the story of one painting in my studio. I'm having a major show at the American University Museum in next year in September through December. And the curator said, you know, it's a huge space. I think you should make a bigger painting. And I looked at her. I said, Norma, I make big paintings, but you know, why not make a bigger one? So I ordered these 3 canvases that are each 60 by 96, and they will be, you know, joined together. And I started working on them, and I made studies, and I started adding other things. So this just is showing you a little bit of what happens about, oh, but I should go back here about process. You might notice in this one, because I realized I had this square that was 60 by 60, I also happened to have 2 canvases that were 60 by 60. And I started making like another series that could be paired to this big painting, which I have titled Unprecedented. So all of a sudden I realized, you know what? I should get another canvas. And what did I add? This is my process. I project for the drawing, and I'm adding, you might notice, this is South America. It's more clear now. There they are in process. So you have South America, and this gray is the Amazon forest. You have Antarctica and the Arctic, and this one is about the fires in the West. Here they are finished. And here is this painting in process, growing and growing and done. And I think that brings you pretty much up to date. So I'm going to stop now, and hopefully I'm going to have a lot of questions from everyone. I leave it to you now, Allison.
Okay. Let's see. Get the gallery. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, Sandra. Okay. Just if you have some questions, you can unmute to ask your question. And let's
Hi,
go ahead.
how about me?
Yep.
This isn't exactly a question, but no, it's not a question. Most people, when they say they're going to have a question and don't apologize. So I apologize. The Schemel Forum has been talking about visiting, we have, at least Alice and I have been talking about visiting Washington. So why not some of us coming to the American University? I've been in their galleries. They have wonderful galleries. At the same time, we have been yearning to go to the African American History and Culture Museum. So maybe we should think about that.
Oh, I love that idea. And I didn't add, actually, I had another slide. I forgot to show it of the floor plan. I have the whole first floor of the museum. And what's happened because of COVID is, as you all must understand, cultural institutions are really hurting. And they reduced their whole exhibition schedule because of budgetary constraints. And my exhibition, which was supposed to start, I think, in August 28th to October 15th, has now been extended through December 15th. So that gives you guys a real opportunity to hopefully, by November, things will be better and one could travel.
Yeah.
This week to DC, the show will be on, and I will tell you right now, Sandra, I would be glad to be in the gallery, perhaps with the curators, and talk to you guys if you come visit. Sure, that's a great idea. Great.
Who's the director? I knew if he's still the same one that I know.
Jack Rasmussen.
Jack Rasmussen. Know him very well. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Oh, you'll have to write to him and tell him about this. But what's really thrilling for me is the curators are two very well-known feminist art historians. Mary Garrett, who's very well known for her work on Artemisia Gentileschi. There's actually a show right now at the National Gallery, and she gave one of these talks because she was supposed to do one in person, of course, and her book just came out. Oh, I forgot it. I should find it and show it to you guys. So these two feminist art historians suggested doing the show about my work, and I'm honored. So it's really been fun putting it together with them.
Yeah.
Sharon, did you have a question?
I do. My question is about scale, and how do you do that? How do you, from a photograph to those very large canvases that you have, how do you do that? And I would imagine there's some scaling involved of some kind, or maybe not.
No, it's a very good question. Well, you noticed I had a projector in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
Before digital projectors, there were slide projectors. And what was so wonderful about a projector for me is I know how to scale up. When I lived in Giverny, I didn't have a projector and I would grid everything up.
Mm-hmm.
What a waste of time. And I'm an impatient New Yorker. So by having a projector, I can literally take that projector, move it in and out on my wall and see how big it should be, what part I want to the crop, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the projector was like a drawing tool. It was a way for me to imagine the scale of
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious. I do like large paintings, but I make small ones as well. Those photographs are actually very small. And what I like about large work is that I think it's a way of becoming enveloped. Like I am sitting in front, I'm in my home now in Philadelphia, not in my studio, but let me see, I could do that. See, this is a pretty, I showed you a picture of that. So this is a large scale painting. I couldn't believe it actually fit on this wall. But when you're confronting a painting, first of all, you see it from far away and you identify what it is. And as you walk closer, it becomes something else. It's magic. And for me, painting needs to be magical and needs to draw you in. And one of the things I like to say about my climate change work is I'm kind of a subversive artist. I want to draw you in with beauty and aesthetics, but then I want you to think about what this is all about. And I do that with some of the symbols, some of the cues, and things like that. And also, when you're at a whole exhibition and you have, wall text that adds to it. Hi, Maury. Good to see you. So does that answer your question?
Okay, let's see. I saw another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sharon.
Hey, Diane. did you begin making art?
My cousin.
You know, when did she know? Was she interested in art as a child? Where did your interest in art come from? She didn't go that far back, right?
Oh, yeah. You didn't want me to go back to my childhood, did you? We'd be here another hour. Okay, that's a very good question. I always drew as a child, but I really didn't know if I was going to be an artist. You know, I took art classes. I majored in high school in art. And I wanted at one point to be a psychiatrist. My father wanted me to be a mathematician or a judge. So there you go. I should mention I'm a first generation American. My parents were immigrants from Europe, from Poland, Russia, Poland, that area. So, you know, they had a lot, and I'm an only child. So they had a lot banking on me, certainly not being an artist. That was the furthest thing that they thought of. But I did have this talent. And because I was conflicted about what I wanted to do as a young person, I went to college at 16 because in New York, you can skip a grade very easily if you're, you know, you have some brains. So I picked a liberal arts school instead of an art school, just for that reason. And I went to Skidmore College, and it had a good art department. So that, you know, it was going to be Brandeis, Skidmore. Those were my choices. And I didn't know much about college because my parents didn't go to college. So anyway, I wound up at Skidmore College, and it was there because of a mentor, a man named Arnold Biddleman, who died very young of a brain tumor. Because of him, I kind of identified. He was a Jewish guy from the Bronx, and his father was a butcher. And there he is, an artist. It's like, you know, that was kind of strange. He had worked with Albers at Yale, and he became my mentor. And that was it. You know, then I just went from undergraduate right to graduate school, started, I think, when I was still 20. And yeah, that's the backstory.
Go ahead, Tony.
Hi, Diane. Thank you so much for this privileged visit with you. And I want to say a special hi to Maury. It's so nice to see you out and about.
Yes, indeed.
But I wanted to ask you two things.
Okay.
You know, remembering your work, which is so magnificent, it's so large and to me unaffordable, but it's just exquisite. But going back to the days of Marion Locke's gallery, wow, I mean, that transition that you've made to what you're doing now, to incorporating your environment, it's just mind-blowing. And of course, seeing your work in Dr. Luther Brady's home, he would so much have enjoyed being part of this. But I saw a large piece of your work at the Joe Zarrett Fitness and Rehab.
Yes.
And right? And it's enormous. It's in the waiting room, but I couldn't find your signature anywhere. So I said to Joe, why is her signature on the back? Why isn't her signature on this painting? And he told me that you don't put your signature on your painting. So I want to know why. And because it still bothered me so much that I had a pamphlet that you gave me with your name and your face and your work on the front, and I left it there on the windowsill so everybody would know it was a Diane Burko work. But number one, why don't you put a signature on your work?
Okay, so, you know, the reason he was able to tell you that is because he came to me, and you weren't the first one to ask him that question. And I explained to him that I think a signature on a work changes what you're seeing. And it's sort of, you notice males usually, men sometimes have signatures, and I want the work to speak for itself. And I think the proper place for one signature visually is on the back of a painting. I have told Joe it probably would be a good idea to have a little label under the.
I told him that too, yes.
But then he said, well, make me one. And I never did it because I'm busy. But the story of Joe, I think, is a cute story that I'm sure you don't know. For all of you people in Scranton, Joe has this wonderful PT/gym facility in Philadelphia. And
What?
Huh? Did someone?
She wanted you to say what it was again, what kind of,
Oh. It's a physical therapy gym facility for physical therapy. People go there to work out and to keep their bodies strong if they had some injury. And I first met him way back at the beginning of his practice there when I had an ankle problem. And I thought I had broken something and I, like a fracture. And I remember this ankle doctor I went to, Dr. Chow, said, before we do x-rays even, you should do some PT. And I've heard about this guy. Why don't you try it? And I swear by him. He's really very smart. So that's how I began my relationship. And one day, so I tried to explain to him that I'm not just your regular person here, that I really need help with my arms. I'm a painter, I'm very physical. And I think I had I want him to help me with my shoulder. So I figured to convince him, I'd give him a catalog. So I guess I gave him a catalog of a volcano show that happened at Locke's Gallery, maybe in 2001. And one day I'm on the bike and he comes over to me, goes, he's Russian and he's very Russian.
Right.
That painting. How do I get that painting? I want that painting. And I go, well, Joe, go to the Locke's Gallery. I don't sell my work. They sell the work. So about 2 weeks later, he comes back. He says, that painting costs as much as a car. Isn't that Joe?
Yeah.
So I said, well, Joe, that's the way it goes. I mean, after all, they get 50% and I get 50%. So he worked out a deal and that's how he got that painting. And he paid Locke's, of course, their 50%. And I think he paid me part of my 50% and the rest I had free access to the gym, which was wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
That's the deal.
They're not so cheap either.
Oh, not cheap at all. Only the elite. What is it? Where the elite
Greet, meet and greet. Right.
So that's my story. And he has a big red volcano painting, which he's very proud of.
Yes, he does.
And it's there. Yeah.
And how about transporting your paintings? It has to be an enormous. Are there special trucking places or what?
Yes, when I was young, they transported on top of my station wagon. And now there are transport companies that do that. Actually, I'm waiting for a shipment of 4 paintings back from Denver and the Michener. I'm in a show with the Michener now, and those are coming back, I think, on February 7th. I mean, I don't anymore, but sometimes I'm in charge of wrapping them, and I have an assistant. And, we have to pack them. It depends on the budget. Museums are wonderful that way because, they're responsible. So a lot of those large paintings have beautiful crates because museums have shown them. And that's, of course, what will happen with the American University. I'll be using USA Art, which I've used before for a show in Houston and a show in Arkansas. They're very good. And their art handlers are artists. So they come in like a princess sometimes, they lay out a table, they take your pieces, and I have by the way, there are small pieces, Tony, that are not that expensive.
Okay, I will call you.
Especially the photographs and the prints. But anyway, it's another plug because it's very hard for any artist at this point in time to be selling their work during COVID. I mean, it's a bit weird. But anyway, they would just wrap each one and it's really very special. But certainly in the first, few decades of my professional life, I didn't have that kind of luxury. Mm-hmm. That comes with time and, lasting, I guess.
That's right. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments?
Of course, I have a question.
Sure, Mike, go ahead.
So have you thought about the Arctic and Antarctic?
I've been there. Of course, I've thought about it.
And have you done paintings?
I showed you some, yes.
Yes, you're right. You're right. So I was going to, if wanted to know if you're familiar with the Scott Polar Research Institute. Actually, it's in Cambridge, England.
I've seen images from there. I'm more familiar with the Ohio State Polar Institute, where Lonnie Thompson is. Do you know a lot about geology then? Because Lonnie Thompson was one of the pioneers of ice cores. And, you know, ice cores is where they actually go like an earth core, you know, and that's how we know about what the temperatures were and the atmosphere was 1800 years ago, because you can go down almost a mile and start reading that. So I know that's called the Bird Polar Institute. So I know those people well. I've actually met Lonnie, he's been to my studio, but I only know the Scott by reputation. How do you know about it?
We've been there a few times, and I have a lot of books about the Antarctic. And
well, have you been?
Yeah, twice.
No, we haven't been to the Antarctic.
I've been there twice.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. The first time was really thanks to collectors of mine. I think actually you guys the Philly people might know Carol Celine in Philadelphia. She had a cousin who worked for a shipping, a tour company that went to the Arctic and Antarctic. And apparently once they fill all their seats, if there's anything left over, they offer it to friends and family. Huge, deep discount. So they were the family and we were the friends. And this happened in 2013 and it was amazing. And ironically, that was the same year that Richard and I were on a residency to the Arctic, to Svalbard. You know about Svalbard, Mike? Do you know where that is?
I've not exactly. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, it's really up there in the Arctic Circle. It's an archipelago that's 400 miles north of Norway. So that was one of my Arctic trips. And the other one, of course, is Iceland, which really isn't the Arctic. But also I've been to Greenland. But going back to Antarctica, so we went there with them in January of 2013. And then the following September, October, we were in the Arctic. And then I had an opportunity to be, my husband and I were educators on a nonprofit expedition to Antarctica with a group called Students on Ice. And that was how I got there the second time. And the reason one of my motivators to go was to then go to the ice sheets in Patagonia. So after we took the ship back to the mainland, we went to El Calafate, and went on a number of excursions. And I've made paintings. You go to my website about those.
Thank you.
How do they preserve the ice cores?
They have this huge facility. And actually, when he was here in 2012, he and his wife, Ellen Mosley Thompson, got the Franklin Award. They're the only second couple to ever get the award. The other couple were the Curies. And Richard asked them that question, not the question of preserving. We understood they had them in this facility, but Richard said, do you have a generator? I mean, imagine. And of course, yes, they had a separate generator. And they're in these facilities that are very cold. You wear your coat, and that's how they're preserved.
And how long do they keep them? How long can they keep them?
Forever.
Forever? Okay.
Underground forever. I mean, that's the idea.
Yeah.
But really, the really important reason the forever is so crucial is as technology and science develops, they can get more information.
Yeah, they can compare stuff. Yeah.
You know, isotopes, all that stuff. They so much through the ice that informs us, tells us we're in deep doo-doo if we don't do something real quick.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
These are great questions. Yes, I see another one. Alana, unmic yourself. You have to unmute. Okay. Yes.
Well, I so admire you.
You're muted again. Hold on.
Okay, start talking. I can't hear you.
She has to unmute.
Unmute.
There you
Okay.
go.
I thought I did.
You're unmuted now.
Okay, all right. I would like to say that I so admire your work. It's so beautiful, so intelligent, and so important in this day and age. And I had the pleasure of meeting you and your husband, I believe, several years ago. I've only been in this area, Scranton area, a few years. There was a bus from Scranton. We came to visit you in Philadelphia in your home.
Yes.
Which, yeah, and I was in awe ever since with your work, your talent, and your passion. And I hope to see the exhibition next year, certainly, that I will have the pleasure of seeing it. Thank you for doing this today, sharing.
Thank you.
your
And thank you
studio.
for learning. No, I really get a lot of pleasure out of speaking to the forum because there's always so much intelligent feedback. My phone just, you hear my phone ringing?
Yeah, we did.
All right, I'll just let it keep ringing. I'm not going to answer it. Sorry about that, but I have my phone with me so I can keep checking the time. But yes, I don't know how many other people that are here I've met before, but I'm sure there are some of them. As you can tell, Sandra and I are pals, and when she asks me to do something, I never say no.
Do you have a next journey, adventure ahead? I know traveling is not really possible right now, but what's in the plan in the future?
That's a good question. What I didn't show you, because I haven't done any work on it, is right before the fall of 2019, Richard and I spent a month in Chile. And we went to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and we also visited the Atacama Desert. And that was fascinating. And what I had intended to work on when I got back was the whole concept of droughts. And now I'm thinking also of working on the Amazon forest. So, you know, as things happen, I change what I want to do. Ironically, in terms of trips, we were supposed to be in Paris for my birthday in September. We were supposed to be in London last week. So I want to just travel.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Work in some way, but it might just be professionally lecturing somewhere, because even in Chile, I lectured in Santiago, and that was a wonderful, gratifying experience, meeting students, and we were there right before they had the uprising. So that was exciting as well. So I don't know where I'm going to travel for my next project, but I have a lot of ideas in my head about what I'm painting now, and you know what I want to paint in the future.
I'm sure you do, and we'll hopefully get to enjoy it. And it's so educational. You've opened a whole new world for me personally.
Oh, that's so nice to hear that. That's part of why I do this. I really believe in public engagement, and I've done that ever since I got involved with being a climate activist. Actually, I won't have an exhibition unless the institution guarantees programming on the climate, on the environment. Actually, I didn't mention this. The university, the American University, is planning an all-university symposium in November on climate change. It's called Seeing Climate Change, which is the name of our show. And I've been meeting with the faculty and the dean recently on Zoom, of course. And they're planning programming throughout the semester in various schools and departments about this whole issue. So it's sort of like the show will be a catalyst for a discussion, and how wonderful to be able to do this in Washington, D.C. with Biden as our president.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very hopeful. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Beth.
I have another question, if I may.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic about
Cautiously optimistic. How could you not be after what we went through for the last 4 years?
Ilona somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just curious, it occurred to me to ask you this. Are you at all in contact with Al Gore with all your work and your expeditions and sharing your knowledge with the public?
I didn't understand. Am I all in contact with what?
Al Gore.
I wish I were. And if any of you people out there know Al, you should tell him he needs to have a Diane Burko painting in his collection.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thanks.
He has lots of handlers, and I haven't cracked that puzzle yet. But I very much would like to be, and I'd like to be in Leonardo DiCaprio's collection as well.
How did it go when you were, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
How did it go when you weren't you in a science, but you were showing in a science facility in Washington?
National Academy of Sciences. That was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
The director and I are going to be doing an exchange conversation in Kentucky. There's a UN all-week festival out of this, I forget what the name of the university is, Q or something, I can't remember the name of it. But that's coming up, and JD and I will be working together. It's a National Academy of Sciences. I mean, I was so honored to be in that facility. And what was also very cool for me is that the AGU, the American Geophysical Union, which is a professional organization of 30,000 earth scientists, they meet every year in San Francisco at the Moscone Institute Center, and I've lectured to them there. And serendipitously, because they were redoing the Moscone Center, they were meeting in Washington, D.C. at the same time that I had my show. So I did a panel with a number of marine biologists, and then the National Academy of Sciences invited a number of those members to a reception. So yeah, it was great. Yeah. And if you haven't been to that institution, you should check it out. It's a beautiful building, and it always has wonderful art exhibitions, but also there are exhibits throughout the public spaces that are quite incredible. And I'm in their permanent collection as well. So there are artists in their permanent collection.
Allison, you mentioned in an email, is there going to be some like a YouTube or a replay of this discussion that we're having?
Yes.
And how does one access that? Because I have some friends here in Sarasota, their son, Diane, he's interning with the big geological, and he's on site now in Antarctica. And I want him to know about you. So I'm wondering from Allison, how do we do that? How do we access that?
Well, all of our videos live on the Schemel Forum page on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and type in the Schemel Forum, all the talks are there. But when this talk, it'll take a couple of days for it to get uploaded. I'll send you the link directly.
Terrific.
Yeah, otherwise they're all there.
Okay, terrific.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and also, Tony, you can just always give them my website.
Yeah, I shall do that. Absolutely. I can just see you and Al on the road together. I mean, why not?
Hey, listen, I love that. I have been written into a number of NSF grants, but it's never materialized. And the reason they let me in, and artists in general in, is because we are the public engagement aspect of their proposal. So if they're doing some very, in the weeds kind of research, NSF wants to know, we got to have more reason to give you the money. And I'm like the reason, because I will then do things
Of course.
I was supposed to go to Greenland actually, but she didn't get the grant. So yeah.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I have to mention that when I have a book, when I come out with a new book, who's the first one to have a book party for me?
Yeah, right. Diane.
Well, we are pals, and it's a mutual.
We work together.
Well, thank you very much. This really was fun. I enjoyed down memory lane myself. I usually don't do one that's like this. And I hope to see you guys in person, maybe in Washington. I think you won't be disappointed. It's a very exciting show. I have a new video on ice, along with that Reef video that's going to be projected on the floor, and a lot of other surprises. So yeah, it should be fun.
Well, right in the middle of this pandemic, it was particularly wonderful to come alive with you.
Well, thank you
so much.
Let's all be safe and sane and be home.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What time is it?
12:21. We
I love seeing Maury. Look at Maury. Hi, Maury.